Loud. Hello and welcome to the Illinois Regional Alumni Association's Honor Study Topic Zoom series. We will be doing all 7 themes in the current Honor Study Topic guide. For those of you that don't know, I am Nicole Hollum. I am the Heirs PR Secretary. I've also been on the board for about 5.5 years now. So, and since we are currently living in a virtual world right now, we decided to bring back our Honor Study Topic Zoom series. We did this quite a few years ago, and it never really went, but seeing that we're living in a different world now, we figured to bring it back. The point of this series is to give members some direction when researching their topics for their honors and action projects. We do have some rules that we would like you guys to follow tonight, just out of courtesy to our speaker. And IRA President Ray Buchanan will explain those rules to you guys.
I want to say thank you all for coming. I think it's going to be a good night. Like Nicole said, we will be doing all 7 themes, but tonight's meeting is all going to be about theme 1. If you have any questions during this presentation, I ask that you wait to ask them till our presenter is done with their slideshow. And if you would use the chat feature to ask your question, then Nicole can ask the question for you, and then we can try and build that dialogue. Or if you want to ask it, you can go right ahead. Just wait till the end of the meeting. And this will be recorded, and we will put it on our IRA Facebook page, and we will have it on our IRA YouTube account. So if for any reason, or if your other chapter members really want to see it, to see what we were learning, you can share it with them, share it with the rest of your chapter officer team. So like I said, this is all done for you guys. So.
All right, thank you, Ray.
Yep.
Like Ray said, tonight we'll be discussing theme 1, Heirs of Our Ways, from the current honors program guide to the 7th generation, inheritance and legacy. Our focus question tonight is, how does growing up in a certain zip code affect a child's life or success? We have a special guest with us tonight, who is a former international officer and an alumni faculty scholar for the annual International Honors Institute. She has a very rich history with Phi Theta Kappa. So at this time, it is my honor to introduce Mrs. Barbara Wolf-Ebert.
Hi, Nicole, thank you. Before we get started, Ray, could you explain how this works with that they only see one window so they can see the entire presentation, please?
Yes. So she's going to share her screen. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Microsoft Teams or if you're using Zoom for any meetings, but when she shares her screen to help you guys see it better, if you go up to the top of the screen when she's doing it and you hit view options, you can actually choose side by side. That way there you get the full view of the presentation, and it just keeps everybody's video on your right-hand side of your screen.
Okay, great. So let me, start my screen. Okay, so can you all see the presentation?
Yeah.
So this is a learning experience for all of us. So if something is wrong with the slideshow or you can't see anything or something, Ray or Nicole, just let me know, right? Because I can't see the chat option. So thank you, Nicole, for this kind of introduction. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. And before I start, you had asked me to briefly explain what the Traditional Honors Institute is and how it works. So traditionally, we meet in June of every year, and of course we didn't this year because of COVID. We meet at a university campus, and there's a limited number of slots, roughly 400, for members and advisors from all over the country and Phi Theta Kappa chapters. We have seminar groups with groups of students or advisors of about 20. And then they are guest speakers who speak in a large auditorium about the honor study topic in a field of their expertise to the entire audience. And after that presentation, we break out in our seminar groups and discuss, or the faculty scholar facilitates discussion about what we've just heard and how to take that back to your chapter for the honor study topic. And with this Zoom meeting, we are trying to combine this format and combine the speaker with the seminar group. So let's see. Oh. Okay. I'm trying to move to the next slide. Yes. So what will we be discussing tonight? First, I'll briefly address the 2020 honor study topic, what it is. Then briefly talk about theme 1, the heirs of our ways, and especially how the zip code affects child's life and success. We'll talk about the determinants of the zip code. Then in detail, we will discuss one example, COVID-19 and school openings, how to develop a research question, and how to develop an action project. And at the end, I'll briefly mention some common mistakes that are made during honors and action projects, and end with planning tools and resources, just an overview for you. And after that, we have the Q&A. So the honor study topic is the thing. We have to remember that. It is, and the theme is the lens through which we members investigate the overall topic. And like Nicole said, the 2020 and 2021 honor study topic is To the Seventh Generation, Inheritance and Legacy. So the honor study topic really asked us, what did we inherit from our ancestors? And what legacy can we leave for future generations? This concept of thinking about decisions with the seventh generation in mind is credited to the Ojibwe tribe and culture. It affects all areas of our life, science, music, sport legacies. So if you think about astrophysics or genetics, the perceptions and knowledge have fluctuated over time as scientists have built on legacies left by scholars and other researchers. Then singers, songwriters, and business people have established and built on the legacies of others and continue to change the music industry. Then breaking down gender inequities in sports through women sports legends. So for example, the US soccer team who won the 2019 World Cup, or running legends like Catherine Switzer. So these are all legacies that are left behind and on which we can build and who continue to build. So when you think about the honor study topic, a good way of thinking about it is according what Rick Hill Sr., Tuscarora of the Beaver Clan and former special assistant to the director of the Smithsonian American Indian Museum said. The people living today are the bridge between ancestors and descendants. So if you think about the topic, always keep that bridge in mind. So when we talk about theme 1, remember the honor study topic, inheritance and legacy, is the thing. And the theme is the lens through which members investigate the overall topic. And each theme has an overarching question. The theme we are discussing tonight is theme 1, the heirs of our ways. And the overarching question is, how do we acknowledge our inheritance and support children in ways that promote humanity's greatest potential? Theme 1 is all about inheritance and legacy for all of our children. So when I'm starting an honors and action research, I like to start by looking at newspapers and the news to see which issues and topics are current. There's a lot you can do here with theme 1. You can look at climate change and children's health, climate change and child labor and exploitation, political activism, protests for racial justice, and children's health and development. You can look at the Democratic and Republican platforms to see what they say about inheritance and legacy of children. That might be another way to go. You could look at COVID-19 and collegiate sports, or you could look at COVID-19 and school starting, what we'll be doing today. But of course, there are a lot of other great examples to use. Remember, no matter what topic you explore in theme 1, emphasize inheritance and legacy. Also, the topic is meant to be viewed in terms of society rather than in terms of the individual. So within theme 1 today we will focus on the question, how does growing up in a certain zip code affect a child's life or success? And there are a lot of determinants. So for example, geography. If a child grows up in an urban or suburban area versus a rural area, makes a big difference on how they develop. Do they live in a densely populated or do they live in an open space? What is the natural landscapes? Are there mountains, rivers, and deserts? Also, income and socioeconomic status is a big determinant. There's a difference whether you whether you live in the industrialized first world country like the United States or in Europe, or if you live in a low-income developing country like Bangladesh, the Philippines, or Ghana. There are also high versus low income areas even within a city. So in Chicago, for example, the income gap has led to a shrinking middle class, so much so that it's almost gone between 1970 and 2017. And of course, that has a big impact on your students. Then it makes a difference whether your parents are employed or unemployed, what level of education they have, and which employment sectors they are in. Are they in government? Are they gig workers? Are they hourly workers at Walmart? Are they teachers? So all of these determinants really make a big difference in a child's life. Technology, access, and quality also make a big difference. So there is a big suburban, urban, and rural divide which persists in technology. It is narrowing, but it still exists. So if you have a lower level of broadband adoption due to a lack of infrastructure and slower access, that will impact how you learn, especially today where online learning and electronic learning are important tools for each child. Also, if you live in a rural area, you're less likely to have multiple devices or services that enable you to go online. Also, do you have one device that you have to share with your family, or do you have multiple devices so that you can study and learn at any time and in any place you would like? Another factor is infrastructure and transportation. What are the transportation options to and from work? What are the options to go to school? Are there alternate means of transportation? What is the access to healthcare? All these determinants are part of what the zip code or of a zip code. Then race, ethnicity, and culture. Your values, beliefs, norms, and opportunities are all shaped by them. So do you live in a collectivist or in an individualist society? Do you live in China, South Korea, or Japan? Or do you live in the United States and Europe? There's a difference whether you are a white American or whether you are a Native American or a Hispanic American, where the family or the community is more important than maybe the nuclear family or the individual child. Do you live in a multi-generational household, or do you live in a nuclear family? What kind of skills, trades, professional sectors, and educations does your ethnicity, your culture favor? They are usually traditional or predominant careers and education opportunities different cultures pursue. Conversely, the environment you live in also shape a child's worldview. So do you hear gunshots every night? Don't you have food on the table? Do you have a parent who is in ICE detention or in jail? Are you working 40 hours to support your family? Then finally, the climate and the environment also play an important role. So what's the temperature? What's the precipitation? What about natural and or man-made disasters? So in Chicago, you live in the Windy City. So when schools open and everyone asks you to wear a mask, it's cool enough, you don't worry about it. If you live in hotter areas, wearing a mask all the time might be more difficult. Think about the California wildfires or Hurricane Laura, who just forced hundreds of thousands in Texas and Louisiana to evacuate. That disrupts a child's life and success. Think about the droughts in Africa. What about increasing temperatures and extreme heat in the global south? That increases exploitative child labor and increased migration. And finally, pollution or toxic environments also affect children's development. So the Flint water crisis in Michigan in 2014, where a lot of lead was released into the water supply, impacted children. Similarly, high pollution in the garment and fashion industry in India, China, and Bangladesh, water pollution, all this impacts how a child lives and its success, or his or her success. So if we think about how does growing up in a certain zip code affect a child's life or success, here's a simple visualization. The graph shows the disparity based on income and based where you live. The income ranges from under 24,000 to over 45,000. On the left side is a map of Illinois, and on the right side is a map of Cook County. And you see from the colors how the income varies along the entire spectrum in different areas. This data is taken from the Opportunity Atlas, which is a database. Let's see. And so the Opportunity Atlas shows you visually and also gives you data that you can pull. And it shows that where children are born makes a difference in their lives. The zip code establishes a geofence, which it identifies socioeconomic status and creates a predictor of major life outcomes. That includes projected lifespan, income, incarceration rate, and even college graduation. All of these can be affected. You would be surprised to hear that infant mortality for non-Hispanic Blacks in the United States is on par with conflict zones in Syria and the West Bank. Also, for a variety of reasons, child and adolescent mental illness, along with suicide rates, is also increasing in certain zip codes. And then with urbanization and regional mobility, infants and children experience institutional care outside the home. That is not equal to all children. So the basic situation is that we are not investing in children as a society to a level that supports healthy development of all children and families. So let's say with the fall semester starting, your chapter is interested in the issue of COVID-19 and school openings as a possible honors in action project. You want to focus on the long-term impact that school openings have on children's future growing up in your specific zip code. keeping in mind the overall honor study topic and the theme about inheritance and legacy for children, here are some examples of possible research projects. You could look, for example, at income and socioeconomic factors. For example, a high income tax base allows students to have technology available. It allows schools to hire additional teachers when they open, to be creative in their meeting places. So for example, in Finland, they have rented a castle to provide additional space for students to study. In other areas, they are holding classes in church graveyards. In-person classes also require that you wear masks. And like I said before, if you don't have the money to provide free masks to all students, then your situation is very different. So masks will not be available in many areas in Africa, even though internet availability and online learning is not available. You could look at gender equality and feminism. So education and economic opportunities have improved over time. But now in COVID, women are still the primary caretaker for children. So they are supporting the traditional gender roles. How does that impact future careers, opportunities for women and children and girls? And how does that perpetuate gender inequality in our children? What are examples in our area? Is this assumption valid? So who really are the caretakers? You might want to look into that. In addition, globally, 70% of healthcare workers are traditionally women. And as such, they are essential workers and are more exposed to the virus. Also, gender-based violence has also increased during the pandemic. So these are all issues around that you could look into. And then finally, climate change. Opening schools. Do you live in a cold area or a hot area where wearing masks or moving classes outside is feasible or not? Or you could look at technology, and technology will be the example we are looking at today. So when developing your research question for any topic and any theme, you want to start broad with many ideas, and then you use your research to narrow down your focus and come up with one specific research question. Make sure in the pursuit of your intellectual curiosity that you are interdisciplinary and global. Even though your project might be local, you want to start out globally. Also, you want to use academic sources, and those sources should be clearly wide-ranging and clearly represent different points of view. So you want to explore the pros and cons and a lot of different aspects of an issue. So remember that you're looking at how zip code affects a child's success. You still want to start your research broad, and you will also be looking at inheritance and legacy, which means what is the established research so far? You want to see if you can identify trends, establish patterns, or critical turning points, and what, if anything, is missing. So you might start by looking at academic articles on child development and learning in general. You might also look at those based on age. So for example, only starting at 4th grade, children can comprehend online learning systems. They are different developmental stages, and that might be discussed in the literature. Then you might look at electronic learning and child development as well as success. So children who pursue or use electronic learning tools may be more likely to graduate, move on to college, be successful in their careers, have higher paying jobs, more access to healthcare, etc. Also, students who engage in active learning might be more activist when they grow up as young adults and as adults. You might want to look at academic research on technological advancements in general. So what are the pros and cons? What are the developments in computing and networking over the last 40 years? What's the internet access and use of new digital technologies? And what will be necessary for employment, education, access to benefits, and full participation in economic and civic life? Then you might want to look at technology and child health. So for example, do we see an increase in attention deficit disorders, obesity, social anxiety, depression, and suicide? Or is it actually beneficial? Then maybe look at the technology gap. Compare technological access in various geographic areas, not only in the United States, but also internationally. So for example, in South Africa, at the national and school levels, education technology is closing the learning gap. But abrupt school closures leave about 75% of learners with limited or no access to interactive and internet-based learning materials. In Ghana, online education in colleges and universities has drastically increased, so that now 5 out of 10 students have access to online learning and 24-hour access to universities. What solutions are available in Europe? The Pew Research Center has, for example, published an interesting study on the technology gap. You also want to include internet connectivity, device usability, knowledge and access. Just because a child knows how to use an iPad or an iPhone or may play games, it doesn't mean the child also knows how to use online learning tools. So you may have started out very general, as you just saw. You've conducted a lot of research in technology and child development and learning in general. So you might have started out with preliminary research questions such as, how does technological access and skills influence children's learning and motivation? Or, how does the rural, urban-suburban technology divide exacerbate inequalities such as graduation rates, education level, and future job advancements? Or, what are the pros and cons of technological advancement? And now you come up with and based on your preliminary research, you can narrow down your research question to a more tangible, measurable one, which might be, how are we adjusting or embracing our legacy as a generation of technological innovation while ensuring continued and improved success for all children in future generations? So you start out very broad, and then you narrow it down to one specific research question. So let's assume you have done your research and you need to develop, and you have found your findings, and you need to develop your action component. When developing the action component, remember that it needs to be related to the honor study topic. In other words, it needs to be inspired by and directly connected to your research conclusion into the honor study topic. Remember, inheritance and legacy. The project needs to reach a variety of audiences, including both the college and the community. And the roles played by collaborators, so those people you work with, were substantive and stemmed from the chapter's research conclusions. So you see, everything in honors and action is driven by your research. So the action can have several components. It can be just a regular project, but it can also promote awareness or advocacy. We will discuss some examples of action projects that you can conduct remotely, virtual, or online. If your action is on campus, remember to follow your local COVID-19 guidelines. So keep your social distance and mask up. So here are some examples. So if you're finding that the technology gap is preventing equal opportunities for all children, you may want to have a fundraising campaign. You may want to work with your local library and raise funds to provide students with free computers and internet access at the local library. Or help the local library have a library bus with a hotspot that drives around neighborhoods. Or you can work with your local schools and raise funds to issue free, refurbished laptops and or internet access to students. You could have a computer drive. You could work with your community, with businesses, nonprofits, electronic stores, or individuals to donate used or new computers. You could work with your local businesses and experts from the computer and technology department and off campus to upgrade old computers. For example, in Warrenton, there is a nonprofit that provides desktop computers in a mission school in Walls, Mississippi. So Warrenton is where I live. They secured 12 donated computers to the school, which allowed the children to learn keyboarding. They didn't even need internet access, but they learned how to use a computer. Now they have increased their mission and reached not only all over the United States, such as in Florida, Texas, and West Virginia, but also internationally in Haiti, Uganda, Nepal, Cambodia, Mexico, and more countries. And you, with your school, could, for example, work with them and help them upgrade those computers or have a donation drive for that. You could provide education and training. So you could, for example, provide tutoring classes for electronic learning to children and their parents. Remember to social distance. You could provide a hotspot on your campus in public spaces, such as the parking lot, for everyone, not only your college students to use. Then you could distribute flyers in your rural community to help promote it. If you wanted to pursue advocacy, you could lobby the federal government to expand broadband access and mobile coverage for rural communities in the United States. So for example, the Federal Communications Commission is currently on phase 2 of its Connect America Fund, which promotes just that. And so you could lobby for that. You could lobby your local or state government to provide money for free computers to high school. You could also increase awareness. You could create a series of videos, podcasts, or webcasts. You could interview experts in the technology or educational sector, or you could record stories of children and or their parents to provide anecdotal evidence. You could interview teachers for the various grade levels. You could host an expert panel on your campus or in your community. Or you could write up an article on your research and submit it for publication in an academic journal or publish it in a newspaper, for example. So these were a few examples for developing a research question and a directly related action project. So remember, no matter what topic or theme you select, you want to emphasize inheritance and legacy to the 7th generation. So this is, let me see. Okay. So one of the most common mistakes is that you don't do that. Another common mistake is not viewing the topic in terms of society, but looking at it as individual people. Maybe, okay, sorry, I lost my spot. Another common mistake is not starting with your research, but with your action. So always remember Your action must be based on your research. You want to identify problems and possible solutions for your community. And after that, you develop your action. Another common mistake we've talked about before is not using 8 or more academic sources, and those not being interdisciplinary and global, and not wide-ranging and providing different viewpoints. You probably want to start out with more than 8 academic sources, but then you will choose those sources that are most applicable and relevant to your particular topic. And you want to include an annotated bibliography, so a brief summary explaining what this source says and how it relates to your specific project. Then finally, not using APA citations. So for your Honors in Action project or your hallmark entry, you want to use formal and consistent APA citations. And samples of that are included in the Honor Study Topic Guide. And there are a lot of resources and tools for you available. If you look on the Phi Theta Kappa websites, there are probably more resources than you ever need or want to look at. The most important one is the 2020-2021 Honors Program Guide, which has a description of the topic, of all the themes, including bibliography, so resources that help you get started for each theme. It has a sample project, it has judging rubrics, and it has tips and guidelines. So it's a really, really useful tool. On the website, you also find the Honors in Action Planning and Judging rubric, which is important for your hallmark entry, but actually serves as a guide for you to develop your project as well. It has an academic sources guide. It tells you how to develop a research question in detail. And if you're unsure about research, a very helpful tool is Research Edge, which is one of PTK's self-paced online learning tool. It is free to every member, and it's a good idea for your chapter officers to learn about your research. And when you've completed it, you get an electronic badge that you can post on your social media and on LinkedIn. Other resources that are available online is the Honors in Action workbook, a journaling guide, a bibliography, a sample Honors in Action project, and it also includes film resources. So if you want to include a film for your theme, you might find something there. And finally, as planning tools, there is Civic Scholar, which is the journal for undergraduate research published by Phi Theta Kappa. And it includes past write-ups of the research and the projects chapters have done. And those are the top chapters and the top projects that are published there. So that will give you an idea what you are looking at or what you're striving for. Then there is the Honors Case Study Challenge, and we can talk about that later. And then there's a link to the PTK Mellon Foundation, who provides funding or grants for each chapter, but you have to apply for your Honors in Action projects. So before we move on to the questions, I want to give a special thank you. First, of course, to Ira for inviting me today. And if you have any questions, here's the Ira email. Then to Susan Edwards, who is the chair of the Honors Program Council, for sharing her insights, not only for the presentation, but also on the honor study topic. So Susan is the Phi Theta Kappa Honors Program Queen, and if you have any questions, Susan can answer them, and her email address is there as well. And finally, to Patty Hall, She's a technical workforce representative on the Honors Program Council. She also wrote Theme 1, The Heirs of Our Ways, and she gave me her insights and shared with me the Opportunity Atlas and other resources. And without them, this presentation would have been definitely not as good. So if you have any questions, or I hope there are a lot of questions, whether it's about how to conducting research, how to get started, about the theme, please put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them as best as I can.
Also, this presentation, if you would like to actually have the PowerPoint, we can arrange that. So if you send Ira an email letting us know you want this presentation to share with your group, we can definitely get that set up for you.
And the presentation, I will put also my notes in there. So you can read more details, and there are some links in there as well.
All right, thank you so much, Barbara. Do we have any questions? Anybody want to discuss anything that Barbara talked about with her presentation?
I have a question.
Okay.
Our group is having a hard time like figuring out what area of research, because we all kind of want to research different things. Like I want to research like how the environment is affecting children, while other people want to do like how the Black Lives Matter and how like COVID. So like we all kind of researched on our own and like found sources and stuff. And we like, is it more important to focus on like one area that affects children, or can we show how different areas affect children? Like that's how we're kind of struggling with that.
Well, let me first say, I think you started out exactly the right way, that you came together and you brainstormed and you actually collected sources and that you're sharing them with each other. There are different ways of doing it. It is easiest if you focus on one aspect of it, because if you're trying to combine all of them, you will have much more information and too many findings spread out all over without being able to narrow them down and develop a project. I think these are all great topics, and so maybe what you can do is that each of you presents, makes a case for your specific area and or specific topic, and then you just vote on it. Or you can ask your advisor or maybe your college and find out what they think is the most pertinent to your local area.
Okay.
Combining all of them is a little bit hard because that spreads you out all over the place. And
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes chapters struggle that they have one specific thing in mind, and then they are tweaking the action towards, or their research toward their action. So I think you're definitely starting at the right point. And if you want to, let's say if you're not making progress or if you still can't decide, feel free to send me an email and I can look at it and maybe give you an idea.
Okay, cool. And when it comes to like presenting the resources and like information we gathered from researching, is it okay to have more than 8 sources, or is it like it's recommended to have about 8?
So you have to keep 2 things in mind, right? So first you have to do your research, and then you do your action, and at the very end you have a hallmark entry. And for the hallmark entry, you can have only 8 sources. And for that hallmark entry, you want to make sure you use the sources that are most relevant to what you're doing and that show that you have a wide range and that those sources are all credible. But what you want to do is you definitely want to start out with more than 8. And let's say in those 8 sources, you might have some that say the same thing. And if so you can not combine them, but pick the one that you think is the strongest one and makes the strongest argument. You might have some sources that are more credible than others or more current than others. So these would be the ones where you build your argument for the hallmark entry on. Then you might have some sources. You might start with watching a YouTube video. And a YouTube video is a great start, but it would not be considered an academic source, but it would be part of your research process. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, you're welcome.
Do you have any other questions, comments?
You know, something I would just like to throw out is that the whole concept of divvying up the country or the earth or whatever via zip code really fascinated me with theme 1, being a business analytical type person, because, you know, a lot of times you look at things by state or region or whatnot. And I thought bringing the postal system into it was interesting. And I started doing some research on it, and I decided to step back because I wanted to get Barbara's take via her presentation tonight, which I greatly appreciate. But just some interesting facts I learned. The city of New York, New York City, New York, has 145 zip codes. Out of those 145, 41 of them are for individual buildings in Manhattan that are so big with business. There's one building that has like 115 companies in it. So that one building has its own zip code.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is. LaGuardia Airport has its own zip code. JFK Airport has its own zip code. Chicago has 84 separate zip codes. So it's just interesting how they can break that up analytically by what children are learning and what resources they have and everything. And then you get out, as you get out, you know, think about Chicago, getting out through the suburbs and then to the rural area, which I'm kind of right on the edge of what they call suburbia to rural. The town I live in, you know, has one zip code, but you can tell there's more affluent parts of town and lower income parts of town. So they couldn't nearly break it up as well. So I just found that an interesting approach to this whole thing.
Yes, thank you for that comment. I didn't know about New York City, so that's really interesting. So if you look again at this map here, you can even see in Cook County, which is basically Chicago, a part of Chicago, all these little areas are zip codes. And so there are a ton of them. And even income just varies tremendously in that zip code. And then, like you said, on the one hand, you have cities that are broken down in, I don't know how many numerous zip codes. And then you live in an area, for example, where I live outside, like 40 miles outside of DC. It's a suburban neighborhood, and our zip code encompasses a whole lot of different demographics. So where I live, our neighborhoods are, I don't know if it's middle income or whatever, but I mean, families can live off one income. So if you think about COVID-19 and school openings, well, if the schools don't open, the mothers can homeschool. So it's not a big issue. And then you drive down the road and there's a predominantly Black neighborhood with people who are struggling and where mothers and fathers are working long hours. Sometimes the children even have jobs. And so when it comes to homeschooling, that's a big problem because who's going to take care of the children, right? You have some people who work all day, then they come home and they do schoolwork with their children from 5 till 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And that's too late for a child to learn. And then we have an area that's completely different again, and everything within one zip code. And of course, when you look at theme 1, which is all about children, zip code is not the only determinant you can look at. And if you read the honor study topic guide on theme 1, it gives you a lot of other ideas. And like, what's your name, Miranda? No. Okay. Who asked the question about the brainstorming? What's your name? Sorry.
Me?
Yes, you.
Sorry, Benasia.
Nasia?
Benasia with a B.
Benasia. Okay. So Benasia, you said like racial protests or racism and children development. That's huge. That's not necessarily related to zip code. You can look at other things. So yes, with children, there's a lot of ways you can look at the honor study topic and at theme 1.
Yeah. Could you go back to the one slide where it talks about common problems with
Yes.
HIV?
Common mistakes. Oops, sorry.
No, it's
That was
okay.
quick. Okay, hold on. I'm getting there.
Yeah, no.
Oh, perfect. That's even better. Hold on. Planning tools, common mistakes, screen sharing has stopped. Okay. It says screen sharing stopped, so let me do this again. Okay. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes.
So when you say not viewing topic in terms of society,
Yeah.
could you like elaborate more on that? Because
Yes.
I had a hard time like understanding what you meant by that.
Okay, so so give me one of your themes or topics or issues you're looking at.
Immigration.
Immigration, okay. So if you think about immigration, you want to look at, let's say, immigration patterns or certain demographics or populations. So you might look at the Hispanic population who are immigrants in this country, or you might look at you can look at undocumented versus documented immigrants. You can look at certain immigration laws in the country or in your state. So you want to look at it in terms of society rather than as an individual person. So you do not want to explore just anecdotal evidence.
Oh.
Because you want to look at patterns and see how you can address those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're kind of like looking more like state country-wise instead of like
Yes.
local.
So you're looking, so when you talk about society, you're thinking in bigger groups.
Mm.
You're not just looking at one child whose parents are, let's say, I don't know what you have in Chicago. Here we have a lot of immigrants, mostly documented, but also undocumented from Latin America. A lot of Mexicans, El Salvadorans, and so on. And so I would look at this entire population and how we as a country or as a society deal with it, rather than looking at one individual person or one individual person who addresses the issue. So you want to think about what can I do, for example, in my local community that could help in a different part of the United States or in a different part of the world, that same group of people.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. Does anybody else have a question for Barbara?
Yeah. In terms of projects being interdisciplinary, can you shed some light on that?
Interdisciplinary.
Yes.
So when I talk about interdisciplinary, that means you look at a topic or an issue, not just from one aspect. So let's say if you look at income inequality. You could just look at the financial aspect of it and explore maybe all business journals, academic journals about business, about finance, and so on. But what you want to do is you want to have a wider picture and see, for example, where income inequality comes from and what it means. So it has an impact also on children's health. So you want to look at journals or articles or academic sources that are relevant to financial status or socioeconomic status or income and health. You might want to look, like I said, with wearing masks, right? If you live in a high income community or country where you have a high tax base, then you can afford to provide free masks for everyone. And so that's another health sector or health issue that you might want to look at. You could look at it in terms of climate, right? Climate and financial health, right? Living in a consumer-driven society, what does that mean for your country? So for example, if you live in a low-income country, say in Bangladesh, and they have a high percentage of the fashion industry where there's a lot of child labor and the conditions are bad and there's a lot of pollution. So you have different effects which are not only low income related, but it also affects mental health, it affects education possibilities, it affects physical health. So there's a variety of issues you can look at. So if you talk about interdisciplinary, think about terms of, okay, do I look at it from a historical perspective, from an economic perspective, from a cultural perspective, from a language perspective? So you want to look at it from different perspectives and different fields.
Thank you, that helps out a lot.
You're welcome. And at the same time, you want to also look at global issues. So even though you might have something in your community that's a problem, you might want to look overseas and see, oh, is there a country that has similar, let's say, problems, and that I found a good solution. And maybe that's something that we can incorporate here. And you also want to look at different viewpoints. So you don't want to only find something that supports your own viewpoint. Let's say you're completely for keeping schools closed in the fall, and because you say it's just too dangerous to send our children back. Then you don't want to look only at articles and evidence that says being online is a good thing, but you also want to find articles who say, and of course academic articles, who say, well, actually in-person learning has these and these and these advantages. So you want to look at it interdisciplinary in all fields, globally, across countries and areas, and a variety of viewpoints. So you want to look at pros and cons.
All right, any last minute comments, questions, concerns?
I would just say on behalf of IRA, Barbara, this has been amazing. You never cease to amaze me. I know we've known each other and been the closest of friends for many years. And let everyone else in IRA know, in addition to the comments Nicole made earlier in introducing Barbara, you know, she is married. They have a wonderful dog they're raising, beautiful home they care for. She's teaching. She's currently working on her PhD at Georgetown University. And not just for her to take the hour or so out tonight to make this presentation, but all the hours she put into putting it together. It's just been truly an amazing gift to the Illinois Region Alumni Association and to the Illinois Region members. So From the bottom of my heart, Barbara, thank you so much. And for wearing the Irish shirt and the Irish
Of course, our shirt and what is say like strong roots. I don't know.
strong roots. Yep, yep.
Yeah. I don't
And-
want to show you my sweatpants, so.
That's okay. And Ray, would you like to tell her about the gift?
I'm trying to remember the gift. I forgot all about it. How about
You
you?
want me to, or do you got?
Do it. Yes, you can
Oh,
take
okay.
it.
Barbara, as a small token of our appreciation for all of your wonderful efforts the past few weeks putting this together and tonight presenting it, as I think you know, we recently opened a 3-section store on Cafe Press, cafepress.com/IRA. There's an area for our pen logo. We have like 3 different logos: the banner logo, or the penny, the banner, and what's actually the logo. So feel free when you have time, if you have time, to go on there, pick anything you want, pick one item from either of the 3 sections. Please don't order it. Contact me so I can order it, because we do get a little bit of a discount. It helps our budget. But contact me if it's a wearable item. Tell me your size, even though I think I'm from past Christmas gifts. And we will get that ordered. And as soon as it comes in, we'll get it shipped to you.
Well, thank you. I should come on more often if I get free stuff.
Well, this is a challenge to any other region that has you on. Just say, hey, you know,
That is true.
set me up with a t-shirt, a pin, and a free thing from their website. What do you got?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been my pleasure. So thank you very much for having me. And I will get my presentation with comments and links to you probably early next week, because I'm going to adjust the notes, and then feel free to share it with your region, and please use it in your chapters, share it with other chapters if you find it helpful. And if you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be serving as a faculty scholar at International Honors next year, and maybe I will see you there in person.
Well, thank you so much. Like Kevin said, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this for us and for all the members. I know it's not the ideal year, so IRA felt this was much needed. We needed to do something like this to help out the other chapters in our region or other regions with the honors in action. So you guys know like what to expect, how to do it, common mistakes like Barbara talked about. So I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope this is very, very helpful. We have another one scheduled when, Nicole?
I think it's tentatively scheduled for October 23rd. We may or may not move that up a little bit.
Yeah, what do you guys feel about that? Because I know it's kind of hard because everybody's working on their HIA stuff or starting to. And so what's your comments or feedback on it? Would you like to see something in September? Would you like to see something in October? Because we are going to go down the line of like theme 2, 3, and 4, and we will have special guests on each one, so that have like expertise in the field or in for the HIA like study guide.
So I don't know about IRA and your members and like chapter members, but maybe if you do it next month, end of next month might actually be good, because it gives the chapters more time to work on it and maybe come up with something.
I agree with that. I think it's a good idea if we can get another guest like Barbara to help us out and do one a month, because we're going to start hitting end of November being Thanksgiving time and end of December being the holidays. So that takes 4 to 6 weeks out of the whole plan. So,
And I think
teams would kind of need to keep the ball rolling here if we
yeah,
can.
and correct me if I'm wrong, I think HIA paperwork is due usually like January, right?
January 31st, normally,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, but it has to, so your project needs to be completed within the calendar year.
Right.
So that's the challenge now. I mean, you'll be in good shape for anyone who works on it next year. If you have officers or so that will be there also throughout next year. But since they changed that, the action component and research has to be done by the end of the calendar year.
And like Barbara was talking about too, if you have like any questions, don't hesitate to ask her. If I'd ask your advisor first, and if your advisor doesn't know it, like can't answer correctly or doesn't know much about it, well, ask Barbara, because she's apparently a vast wealth of knowledge. So it's very nice to have her on Team Ira.
Well, actually, I think you have several faculty scholars and some on the Honors Program Council from Illinois. So these will be excellent resources. And if as a chapter you still don't know, just ask Susan. Susan Edwards, she knows everything. And if she doesn't know it, she will send you to the person who knows. So.
All right. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. And I am hitting the stop button on the recording now. So